Welcome to the day in history for May 19th. Today, well, it took me a long time to find a day in history today. This is quite possibly one of the most boring days I have ever found. That's not to say that today's isn't interesting, but most days I have to choose what I do. But today, there was nothing. I couldn't find anything. Usually, we're on camp out, and so I didn't have any saved. But I did find something for today. Today's day in history is the day that shoes are first mass-produced using what they call the lasting machine. Now, you might be saying, Mr. Coughlin, seriously, we're going to talk about shoes. But, shoes are pretty important, right? One thing that I have noticed while teaching from home is that I don't have to wear shoes very much, which is kind of nice, but shoes are still important. So, the big idea for today is that clever engineering can solve most problems. Now, I'll let you guys go ahead and write this down. Okay, let's take a quick walk. Well, actually, no. Before we take a quick walk, we got to go to the location on the map. Here we go. Okay, so we're in Lynn, Massachusetts. Now, the story takes place all over the world because people wore shoes all over the world. But today's day in history is really about the invention that made shoes be able to be mass-produced. So, let's go back in time. Now, I don't think you're going to find this at your local shoe store, but about 3,300 years ago, a stone caveman person was wearing these shoes. They found them. Now, they look kind of strange, but we can see how they work, right? You have the same sort of toe covering in the front, you have webbing around the back to hold your heel, and they actually had straw inside to help keep it warm. Now, these shoes, like I said, were about 3,300 years old, but shoes like this go back really, really far. But here's the problem. We don't have a fossil or archaeological record because shoes were primarily made out of leather, wood, plant fibers and stuff like that, and those things deteriorate, those things break down in the dirt, right? Like, they're not made out of metal or stone, so we don't find them from, a million years ago. But we don't know if a million years ago, early human ancestors wore something on their feet. I would think they did, but I don't know. It's a good research topic. It's a good thing for an archaeologist to do. So, very old shoes. Now, as we move forward in time, we're looking around, 1200 BCE. We're talking ancient Greeks, stuff like that. These are shoes that look a little more recognizable. They look pretty comfortable, and you can actually buy shoes like this today. They're kind of the throwback item. And they're mostly made out of leather and other items, but they look like very functional, good shoes that you can move quick in and will protect your feet. As we move up into the Middle Ages, we started to get to things that look a little more modern, but still a little strange. Now, there was this thing in the Middle Ages where the longer the little tip of your shoe was, the longer it was, the more status you had, the more noble you were, the more money you had. So if you had a really long tip on your shoe, it showed that you had a lot of money and power. Some of them were so long, they'd actually have to take it and tie it around back. So sometimes if you see old medieval pictures, you'll see the shoe with like the little tip coming back up. Kind of interesting. Now, as we move forward in time, we're looking 1500s and so, we start to get some more interesting looking shoes. The ones on the top look fairly normal. They've got some laces. You got some weird looking ones on the bottom, but I don't know if you've ever seen fancy shoes today. There's some pretty strange ones. As we get up into the Renaissance in the 1700s, we start to see some really fancy shoe designs. These look a little more modern. Like, I could see people wearing shoes like this today. I think I actually have. But they were more artistic, and they had a fairly common style. Now, they get a little strange, but, to be honest, if you look at some of the clothing that people wore back then, we might think they're pretty strange as well. So they matched. Now, let's talk about shoemakers. Now, I actually had a really good friend in high school, and you know what her last name was? It was Shoemaker. Anybody know somebody with the last name Shoemaker? Maybe. So shoemaking was a huge profession. You know why? Because everyone needed shoes, and everyone needed two shoes. Okay, shoes were worn all the time and they wear out. How many pairs of shoes have you had in the last couple years? A lot, right? As you get older, you maybe don't go through quite as many shoes, but people use a lot of shoes. It's a fundamental human need. It's a protection for our foot. And so there was a big industry, there was a big craftsmanship of making shoes, and it was done by hand. And the thing is that a good shoemaker they could do maybe, like, just if they were mass producing them, they could do 50 shoes a day. Well, not by themselves. That's what they were in a group. Like an individual shoemaker, it was kind of like an art form. But shoes were made slowly. Now, I found this pretty cool picture of a shoemaker's workshop. Each person would come in, and when they ordered shoes, they would make like a cast or a outline of the person's foot so that they would know how big to make the shoe. They would cut the sole and the leather, and they would wrap it around, and it got very, very tedious. Now, it took a long time, and it was like I said, a skilled craft. And so what happened is people kind of protected their job as shoemakers, and there was even some instances of shoemakers going on strike because of wages and stuff like that. But what was interesting is that as many other things in the Industrial Revolution, we're talking mid-1850s, as we started to use machines to make all kinds of things, and we've talked about this before, shoes was one of the things that didn't work. And it was primarily because of how they had to put the leather on top of the shoe. Now, we'll talk more about that in just a sec. So let's talk about Jan Matzlinger. Now, this gentleman is the guy that invented what they call the lasting machine. Now, the lasting machine is what made it so they could go from producing 50 shoes a day to almost 700 a day with this new machine. And what it did was it took the price of shoes and it immediately cut it in half. Pretty amazing. Now, so this guy, he was born in South America in a place called Perambino. It was a Dutch colony in South America. And when he was a kid, he joined the what's it called? The Dutch East India Trading Company. And he was a sailor for a while. And that eventually brought him to America. And when he got there, he started working at a shoe factory. Now, this is the process that they could not figure out how to make a machine to do. If you look here, what this person is doing is called lasting. And if you take the shoe mold, so the size of your foot, and you wrap the leather around it, you have to like hammer and sew down that leather around the shoe. And nobody had made a machine yet that could do it. And so everything had to be done by hand. And like I said, even the fastest shoemakers could only do like 50 a day. And so what Matzlinger decided was, he's like, there's got to be a way to do this. And he figured it out. And this is what he built. This is the actual patent. The patent was filed tomorrow, I think, for Day in History. But it's a pretty interesting looking machine. It looks kind of strange, right? Now, it was very effective though. This is one of the common pictures that I saw pop up. And what the machine did is it would push it down and wrap it and hold it in place and then secure it all at once. The amount of engineering, I mean, just look at this thing. This guy designed and built all of this, and it worked extremely well. Like I said, it made it so we could mass produce shoes. Something that humans use on a daily basis, all of a sudden could be mass produced. Pretty cool. Now, this is the old way. A workbench, a mold, hand tools, and the new way is this. This is one of the original lasting machines that he invented that I found in like a shoe museum in some factory town. But isn't that crazy? That thing changed how we make shoes. Now, nowadays, we mass produce shoes on an amazing scale. There's billions and billions of people on Earth, and most of them buy shoes. So, Huge factories pump out shoes all the time. Now, when we think about the future of shoes, though, boy, there's a lot of different things that could happen. Now, I just Googled future shoes, and I came up with these. Mostly what I came up with were the shoes from Back to the Future. But apparently, they invented these shoes that have automatic lacing. So you put your foot in, and it goes whoosh, and like ties it for you. I don't know. I thought it was pretty crazy. It seems a little absurd when you can just, tie it yourself. But, I mean, if you're going to live in the future, you might as well have shoes that lace themselves, right? Okay. Not my most exciting day in history, but you and I now know a lot more about shoes. Thanks, guys.